All right, Jimmy, thank you for taking time to talk with us today. With northern San Luis Obispo County being newly included here in the 19th district, I'd like to start by just offering you the chance to introduce yourself to voters here who may not be familiar with you and what you're all about. So tell us about yourself and how you would represent the people of northern San Luis Obispo County.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Once again, I'm Jimmy Panetta, and I'm the U.S. representative for the 20th Congressional District, running for the 19th Congressional District. And I can tell you that I would represent the northern part of the San Luis Obispo County very similar to how I do my job right now, in that I make sure that when I work in Washington, D.C., I'm all about the Central Coast and ensuring that our values are fought for at the Central Coast. And what I mean by that is not just the values, but especially the people. Because what inspired me to get in this job and what motivates me to continue to do this job is that in this job, you really can affect people's lives. And you can do that through casework, you can do that through our federal legislation, and you can do that through federal funding. Now, obviously, I've seen it in the tens of thousands of people that we've worked with and helped with that personal government issue, basically being that bridge from the Central Coast to the federal government and back. And I cannot stress that when you actually help somebody with an immigration issue, with an IRS issue, a Social Security issue, like I said, a military issue, you actually can affect their lives. And I've heard that as people have come up to me, make it a point to come up to me and thank me for the work that we did to help them get a husband here in this country so that they can start lives here in this country, to help a daughter whose father wanted a military medal from World War II, and we were able to track that down, and she thanked me in tears. It's work like that that I'm telling you, they'll never forget, and I'll never forget. Look, when it comes to legislation, the federal legislation that I passed 8 bills just in this Congress alone. Bills that will reduce our carbon output, reduce our wildfire threat, bolster our threatened species, protect our seniors in nursing homes, and enhance the future of our military members. That doesn't include the major pieces of legislation that I supported in Congress that got us through COVID, will increase our manufacturing in the U.S., will provide benefits to my generation of veterans, reduce the threat of gun violence. We also passed a bill that reduced drug prices for seniors and reduce our carbon output with the largest investment in human history to deal with climate change. And we passed a major bipartisan bill to invest in our infrastructure. And let me tell you, when it comes to that type of federal funding, that really is something that surprised me, because you can have an impact on local issues through federal funding. And we've seen that when through the American Rescue Plan, the CARES Act, which provided millions upon millions to our local counties and cities that supported not just those governments, but our schools, our hospitals, our airports. Even we funded our police departments, and funding that not only helped them get through the pandemic, it's actually funding that provided us now a strong foundation in which we're dealing with inflation. And then, of course, there's infrastructure investment as well. And I've been so fortunate to fight for and obtain funding for housing, funding for water projects, and even community funded projects that really will help solve local issues and create local jobs as well.
What are you most passionate about changing or working to make better if voters send you back to Washington?
Look, I think right now in my interaction and getting out to the new 19th Congressional District, which is very similar to the 20th Congressional District, although not geographically, in that it stretches all the way from San Jose up over the hill to Santa Cruz, down the Monterey County coastline to the northern San Luis Obispo County area. But what I've seen is that the politics are the same as the 20th Congressional District, and the policies are the same as the 20th Congressional District, in that we got a lot of beauty, we got a lot of bounty, we have our military bases, and we got a lot of bedrooms. And so the issues from those Bs, as I call them, obviously with our beauty, it's making sure that our environment is protected, and we continue to reduce our carbon output, making the investments and with tax credits that we did through the IRA. With our bounty, it's obviously agriculture. Look, I no longer will have the Salinas Valley if I'm fortunate enough to get elected, but what I lose in lettuce, I gain in wine, because we all know about the wineries and all the distilleries and all the breweries that are there in northern San Luis Obispo County. So it's making sure that our agriculture is supported, especially through the 2023 Farm Bill that's coming up, making sure that the agricultural research title within the Farm Bill is not only reauthorized, but re-energized with more funding to deal with our specialty crops, to protect our specialty crops, but also make sure that we have the funding there to deal with the labor issues and the water issues. And so the type of research that's necessary to mechanize is very, very important, and to also kind of look towards ways in which we can reduce our water output as well. And then, of course, it's basically our bases, our military bases, making sure that people understand that it's not just about our national security, it's about our community security, and that, you know, we have military bases on the Central Coast that contribute close to 1.4 billion to the economy and provide over 15,000 jobs. So ensuring that they're supported as best as we can through the National Defense Authorization Act. And then when I say bedrooms, it really is about affordable housing. That's an area, an issue that really connects the 20th congressional district from the, as I say, the suburbs of San Jose down to the vineyards of northern San Luis Obispo County, and ensuring that my work on the Ways and Means Committee, we continue to provide the tax credits necessary for the development of low-income housing. But also what I'm realizing is, and what I'm going to be introducing a bill coming up, is about middle-income housing, workforce housing, making sure that our police officers, our firefighters, our teachers who work in our communities actually live in our communities. And we do that by providing incentives to developers to create middle-income housing, workforce housing, so that we can ensure that those who serve in our communities spend time in our communities and not in their commutes to get here. So, and then ensure, obviously, the grant programs that we have been when it comes to the homeless issues, unfortunately. In my limited time in the United States Congress, I was able to secure over $100 million for housing programs and homeless programs to ensure that the local entities, the local governments, have that funding to work the programs that fit their communities and shelter people as necessary. So, like I said, beauty, bounty, bases, bedrooms, affordable housing, and making sure that basically when it comes to all those, that we have the water project or the funding for water projects that the locals agree upon. Look, I've proven in my limited time that that is what the federal government is about. It's up to the locals to decide what projects fit their communities, but I, as a federal representative, will ensure that the federal funding is there for them to support those projects. I did that with the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act bill that passed, was able to get $67 million for the Pajaro River Flood Management Protection Project. We recently got $20 million for the SoCal Water District Recycling Program, and I recently got $10 million for the Pure Water Monterey 1 recycling and recharge water project. So that's the type of support that I, as a federal representative, have provided the Central Coast, and I hope to continue to provide the Central Coast.
All right, you've given us a few of them here in your first two answers, but I'll ask you if you could maybe get it down to three accomplishments that you are most proud of.
Yeah, look, just in the 117th Congress, I've passed 8 pieces of legislation. Actually, had them signed into law. I've introduced 40. I've passed out of the House probably about 15, but I was able to get 8 signed into law. And I can tell you, one of the ones that made me the most proud was called the Dli Act. And up here, we have the Defense Language Institute, and it's pretty much geared towards enlisted. So those bright, shining stars that graduated high school, didn't necessarily have a college degree, but they did well on their ASVAB. So they go there to learn language and bolster our national security. I was able to sign a bill into law that allowed the DLI to provide BA degrees to those students. And I was actually able to meet the first 2 students, the first 2 enlisted that actually were conferred BA degrees, bachelor's degrees by the DLI. Basically, like I said, they're there through that bill. We were ensured that not just were they there to support our national security, that bill allowed them to support those enlisted their personal security as well going forward, allowing them to have a bachelor's degree. And then it's also, like I said, the personal casework that we continue to provide the locals to ensure that government works for them. Look, I think we know right now that a lot of people, just when they turn on the TV and they see the division and people yelling and screaming, and they see the dysfunction, at least what they get from TV, they need to realize that government can actually work for them. And that when they come to our office with a personal issue with the federal government, we will do everything we can to help them. And that is what has made me so proud. And like I said, we can actually affect their lives and seeing the effect on their lives when we actually do our job, when we actually make government work for them. And then my third accomplishment is actually doing all of that in a bipartisan fashion. There's a report that comes out every year by the Georgetown School of Public Policy. It's called the Lugar Score, and it literally goes through each and every member of the Congress and determines how bipartisan they are. Are they willing to actually talk the talk and walk the walk when it comes done? And I ranked number 56 out of 435 in my bipartisanship score. So it demonstrates that I'm willing to work with anybody that will benefit the people of the Central Coast, because that's why I go to Washington, D.C. Trust me, we all know and we all see on TV, unfortunately, that there are members of Congress that like to go back there to try to blow things up or bang their shoe on the table. That's not my style. My style is to put my head down, get the job done, and serve the people of the Central Coast. And I think I've proven that through my record for the past 5.5 years as a representative of the 20th Congressional District, and also certain scores like the Lugar score that demonstrate my bipartisanship and willing to work with people to get things done.
What can lawmakers in Washington do about inflation?
Yeah, look, I think obviously when you look at inflation, the good thing is what we're seeing is that gas prices have continued to drop for 14 weeks in a row. Now, prices are still high. I saw that the other day. Heck, I was driving back from San Luis Obispo and I stopped at Taco Bell, and I think I paid almost $10 for just 2 items. So clearly prices are going up, and I think we all know that. But we also got to realize there's a number of reasons for inflation. Obviously, coming off COVID, there was a tidal wave of demand and our supply couldn't keep up. There's a tight labor market right now, and yes, people need to get back to work. Our supply chain was weak. Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And we got to realize inflation is not just confined to the US. We're seeing it from Australia to Germany and from Japan to the UK. However, despite all that, the economy is still pretty dang hot. Consumers are spending on goods and services. You got a 3.6 unemployment rate. You have 315,000 jobs that were added in August. 100% of the jobs lost during COVID are actually back. Housing market is still strong. And yes, there are companies that have huge profits right now. But you're going to see, and when it comes to our monetary policy, the feds are going to continue to do their thing, despite being slow to come to this, and they use transitory way too much, to be honest with you. They're going to do what's necessary to kind of slowly raise those rates, sell the bonds, get that money out of the market, and then try to prevent a recession with that slow cool and that soft landing of stability, which we hope they can do. Now, when it comes to fiscal policy, what we can do in the federal government, I think obviously you're seeing the effects of what President Biden did when he sold off the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, and basically the consistent drop in gas prices for 14 weeks in a row. We passed the Reduction Act, which basically is going to reduce drug prices for seniors. And then when it comes to insulin and obviously healthcare for those on the ACA, it's going to reduce in the long term our energy prices when it comes to the investments in clean energy we made. And then we bolstered our supply chain when it comes to making sure that we've passed the CHIPS Act so that there's American manufacturing of semiconductor chips. We passed the Infrastructure Investment in Jobs Act, both bipartisan bills that will invest significantly in our supply chains, our ports, our roads, our bridges, to ensure that we can get those goods to the market to meet that demand. And then we also got to focus on getting people back to work. Yes, people got to get back to work, but let's provide the help that's necessary in ensuring that there's childcare, like we did during the pandemic with the child tax credit, but also what type of immigration reform can we do to ensure that people who want to come here and live the American dream like my grandparents did, that they have that opportunity to do it. Let's legalize the people. Let's get them the work permits. Let's get them working. Let's get them to pay taxes and get them on the books, I think are things that we can do in Congress.
What type of energy policies do you support?
Look, I think obviously what we've seen from the the Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA, in making the largest investment in our reducing our carbon output, you want to see a pivot to clean energy and a pivot to clean transportation. And you do that we did that by not penalizing. We did that by incentivizing with all the tax credits that were there to pivot to clean energy and clean transportation. I'm proud that I had 3 bills signed into law within the IRA that provided tax credits for microgrids, for linear generators, and for clean buses as well. So obviously that's something we have to do, but in the meantime, basically we have to ensure that there is a proper energy resources for that type of transition. And so that's why you saw, I think, the governor basically take the step that he did with the amazing legislation and work by our local state senator, John Laird, to ensure that there's proper safety conditions in keeping open the Diablo Canyon plant, which I think is something that they had to do. Understandably why the governor wanted to do that, why Senator Laird and other senators agreed to that, to ensure that there is that proper energy transition going forward so that we can get to clean energy and reduce our carbon output and deal with the effects of climate change.
Okay. What makes you a better choice for Congress than your opponent?
Look, I think people will basically look at my record, look at what I've done before I got to office and the work that I did for veterans, but also look at what I continue to do when it comes to serving people of the Central Coast, ensuring that government works for them, passing legislation that affects their lives and affects our future, and making sure that there's funding there here locally, fighting for that federal funding to ensure that we have affordable housing and the proper funding for water projects that the locals can agree upon so that we can continue to protect our beauty, continue to protect our bounty and our agriculture, and ensure that we continue to have national and local security with our military bases as we go forward, ensuring a strong economy and a strong Central Coast.
Great. That's all the questions I have for you, Jimmy. Is there anything else you'd like voters to know?
I think we hit it.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
I think I tried to, get as much in with your questions as possible.